You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
When I was growing up, I read a lot of books. Like, I didn't play sports. I didn't go outside. I played with Star Wars figures, and I read a lot of books. And when I say I read a lot of books, I read a lot of books. I would check out 5 or 6 at the library at a time, and I would devour these books. This is before the invention, not the invention, but before the proliferation of home video cassette recorders. We got our Beta machine, and movies opened up as far as all you wanted, whenever you wanted. That's what I did. Oh my God. I would the summertime, I would stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning watching movies. I'd sleep till noon, get up, eat something, and go right back to watching movies. I was aware of an outside world, and I needed that outside world when I would ride my bike to the Lakewood movie theater or the Alondra 6 movie theater. But most of the time, movies. But before that, it was books. And I grew up with a whole set of different heroes. My biggest hero was Roald Dahl. When I read, it was read to me first, probably around 2nd or 3rd grade. Our teacher read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to us, and I was enthralled. It was a reason to go to school. That teacher's going to read another chapter. I am going to school. Does he get the ticket? I have to know. And then when you get taken to the library, and you're like, we can take this book home. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I've read hundreds of times. Then I discovered there was a sequel. Not very many people know there's a sequel. It's a bizarre sequel. It's not anything like the first book, but it does feature Charlie and Wonka and Grandpa Joe and all the other characters. So I devoured that too. One time I went to Tennessee for the summer, and I think I've talked about it. Like, I went to the World's Fair in '82. I went to a water park. I went with my uncle to his restaurant and helped him prepare steaks and stuff for the night, and also played video games all day. But when I went to my Aunt Rita's house, she had I was always amazed at houses in Tennessee, because houses in California are flat. Unless you've got an upper story, they're flat. Houses in Tennessee are built on hills, so you go in the front door and you go up 3 stairs to the living room, or down 15 steps to the family room, but the family room is level with the back part of the house. You can go out a patio. It's not like it's underground. So it always amazed me, like, the architecture is so different. But down in that family room, Aunt Rita had the entire collection of the Hardy Boys mysteries. And I didn't know at the time that they were written by, like, a factory. The original author, same with Nancy Drew, like, they died and then somebody else took over and then somebody else took over. But it didn't matter, because here was, 40 to 50 books I could read all summer. I read them all. I read Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. And I lived through books. I loved books. And I always thought that, I also read, I think I've talked about it before, a really bizarre series of books called Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators. And it was about 3 kids who ran like a detective agency, and they would get their cases, no joke, from Alfred Hitchcock. Like, he would show up and, like, I want you boys to solve the mystery of the clock that struck twice. They're like, we're on it. And they would have all these clever ways of doing things. They had a way of passing messages across America called Ghost to Ghost. Like, I just thought it was cool. And those books were hard to get. I used to get them at the thrift store. And I remember uncovering one, was like, oh, I got another one. Alfred Hitchcock. But you can see, like, I inhaled books, inhaled them. And I always thought that people who wrote books, like people who make movies, they have this special recipe. They have this thing that I don't have, can't get, and will never have, and that's whatever it is that possesses them to sit down and tell a story in 200 to 400, or in the case of when I became a teenager and discovered Stephen King and read them all. Like, I was amazed at how prolific King was. When I caught up with King, I moved on to Dean Koontz and read all of Dean Koontz and John Grisham. I mean, you name it. And I even read, after Red October, I read all of, what's his name's books? What's the Red October guy? Everybody's screaming at the radio now. I can't think of his name. Oh, darn it. Tom Clancy. I read a lot of Tom Clancy, even though, like, they were bizarre books about war and, huge battles. But some of them are more personal, like the Mr. Clark series was really good. But suffice it to say, I just thought, like, when I started my writing journey, and you've seen the progression of short stories to screenplay, to longer stories to screenplays. I should mention the first taste I ever got of watching something I wrote get performed was when I was at Gate. They allowed you to do extra projects for points, and the points you could buy stuff at the end. I don't remember, but I remember I wanted to do a parody of Thriller. So I wrote this thing called Chiller, and the gimmick was everybody was cold while they were doing it. It was stupid, it was silly, but watching people laugh at something I wrote was really gratifying. I thought it was cool. So that really started the journey. And what was I, 12? And as I moved through these writing stages and wanting to write longer and more advanced things, that screenplay about my high school life that's 300 pages that's ridiculous, but it's still a screenplay. It's still exterior trailer park, cut to, character, whatever, Jeff walking down the street, exterior graduation. It doesn't have the fullness of a full novel. And I think if I had to pinpoint what started the novel part of the journey, twofold. First, obviously, Harry Potter. Reading Harry Potter and seeing what someone had done, J.K. Rowling had done, putting an original story against the backdrop of myth and lore that we already knew, witches, werewolves, monsters. Like, that's brilliant. She started off a chain where your book didn't have to be 100% original. You just had to have good characters, and we would forgive the rest. You know what I mean? Professor Lupin is a werewolf. She's telegraphing it, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I'll get to a Harry Potter series. I was talking to my kids about it the other day. But Harry Potter begat Percy Jackson, where Richard Riordan did the same thing, where his original characters were monkeying around in Greek mythology. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. There was this whole wave of, you can take an original idea, warp it, bend it, melt it, and wrap it around stuff we already know. And that's at once exciting and new and familiar. And that's where, like, I got excited. Like, oh, I could do that. I could totally do that. And the other book was Fight Club. Because, and I'll tell you why, Fight Club in the theater was a revelation. Like, I was blown out of my seat watching Fight Club on the big screen. So, of course, I had to seek out the novel that it was based on. And when I discovered that Chuck Palahniuk had done that entire Fight Club story in a little over 200 pages, I was astounded. You know, when you look at the movie Fight Club, the book should be 500 pages easy. But the economy of words and just cutting to the chase. And the same goes for the first 2 Harry Potter novels. Even though the movies are almost 3 hours, the novels clock in at under 300 pages or around there. Like, not a lot of pages for what's on the screen. So the authors, J.K. Rowling and Chuck Palahniuk, are painting these vivid new worlds with really broad strokes and letting you fill in all the rest. And I wasn't sure I could do that. You know, as you can tell by the show that I do, I'm pretty verbose. I have what Mr. David, my English teacher, used to yell at me, diarrhea of the mouth. And he was right. And sometimes I have it on the page. But all the attempts I did at writing a novel failed miserably. I could never get past, page 20, page 30. If I got to page 60, I was like, yes, and then I would never pick it up again. Because what they don't tell you about writing a novel, and you can go to a class, you can hear somebody speak, but everybody's novel journey, and you just take the word novel out of it. Take the word writing out of it. Everybody's creative journey is completely different. What works for me won't work for you. What works for you ain't gonna work for me. So, getting advice, the only good advice I ever got for writing was when I went and saw Stephen D'Souza speak. Stephen D'Souza wrote Die Hard. And I also the same day saw Randall Wallace speak. Randall Wallace wrote Braveheart. And they basically said the same thing. Keep writing. Writing is writing. Writing is also rewriting. You're going to rewrite the thing that you write 100 times. And he went on, and I'll get to it later what he said, if I remember. But what he was saying and what held true was you just have to keep going. You can't sweat the small stuff is what it is. So I tried a whole bunch of novels. Like, I had these ideas. I'm going to write the great American novel. I'm going to be sitting somewhere smoking a pipe with a glass of brandy, with my gold inlaid hardbound book, with attached ribbon to hold your place. And you know what? That's not what book writing is. Writing a novel is misery. It is absolute misery. Why do you think Hemingway blew his brains out? Why do you think Spalding Gray killed himself and was found on the side of a riverbed? I used to watch Spalding Gray on the Letterman show. He was this fringe performance artist / writer / humorist. And one time he had a one-man movie or play that was turned into a movie called Monster in a Box, which referred to his manuscript in a box. And I could relate to that so much because writing something big or any creative project that's big, like I know one of the head Imagineers, and I look at his job and go, oh my God, I would die to be an Imagineer at Disney, to create on a scale that big. But I also know that he kills himself. Every day he kills himself, and every night he has to be reborn. He gives everything to his project. He is spent, and he has to somehow recharge the next day. And I'm in awe of that kind of a huge project with hundreds and thousands of people looking to you, and the millions of people around the world looking to the finished product. I'm in awe of that kind of work. I'd love to be right in the middle of it. Are you kidding? But we all do it in our own certain way. Maybe not on a grand scale as a Disney park, but we do it on our own scale. Those of us that are creative, we all do it on our own levels, and we all wallow in our own misery. And so I embarked on writing a book in 2003. Think about that, folks. 13 years ago, I sat down to write the first chapter of my book. And first I started with an outline. It was a real simple outline. And what had happened was, like Etheria, the screenplay that I wrote, I had a dream. I woke up and an entire narrative for a novel was in my head. And if you've ever seen my first novel, it's 500 pages. Imagine having the bulk of 500 pages in your head all day, every day, until you get it on paper. Once you get it on paper, you can jettison it, sort of. It never really goes away. But you can at least park it somewhere temporarily. And I think if I had to figure out what the differences are between people that produce and people that consume, the people that create, people that are creative, we're all weird. And that goes with the territory. You have to be weird to will something into existence. And I think when you look at the big dreamers, like Walt Disney, Walter Knott, J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, we wake up and we embrace the nightmare that we had. We don't shake it off and get a glass of water and go, I gotta forget that. No, we analyze it. We dissect it. We grab it. Whatever that phantom is lurking in the darkness, we grab it. We pull it out. We shake it and see what it's made of. And we find out what's in it that's useful. And the nightmare/dream that I had was, what if the powers of the 7 days of creation were each locked in a trunk? That's it. That's the dream I had. It was kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark with 7 arcs. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather. It's been a long week, and the weather's not helping. So I'm under the weather during the bad weather. But anyways, I had this dream about these trunks. And so I thought, okay, what if they're nested inside each other, like Russian nesting dolls? And there are 7 of them, and each one holds one of the powers of the day of creation, because power that big has to be stored somewhere. It can't just go off into the cosmos, right? And let me tell you, every great project, from a book that you like, TV show, reality show, movie, theme park attraction, all begins with, hey, what if we do this? What if I do this? What if we do this? What if we were to take this and do this? And it takes somebody, whether you're talking to yourself or to a team, everybody has to go, yes, we agree with this. We're going to throw all of our efforts into this. And you know what? A lot of times it's easier to convince a team of 5 that it's a great idea than it is to convince yourself that it's a good idea. So when I started writing, at the time, a book called The 7 Trunks, I had a lot of days where I thought, what am I doing? This is stupid. Because I've written screenplays. Screenplays fit in a notebook folder, a 3-ring binder on the shelf. I had a whole bunch in the garage. Novels, a little different. I'm going to have to get one of those really big 3-ring binders, or 2 of them, depending on how many pages I go, right? But what happened was, I did this outline where I said, okay, if we start with the trunks, what we have to do is find the keys. So the journey will be finding these keys. But if you know your pop culture, and if you know your Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, which I will tell you I read after I finished my first draft, you'll be astounded to know that I got all the beats right. But the main beat is that the story that you're reading is never what's really going on. The subtext is infinitely more important than what's on top of the page. The book is about somebody finding 7 keys and opening 7 trunks. That's it. But the story that I'm telling is the story that we're all telling from the day time began. It's about a boy looking for his father. It's about a boy becoming a man by finding his father, confronting him, and overpowering him, so to speak. Every great story is that story. I didn't realize when I was writing it that that's what I was writing, but subconsciously my hand and my brain were leading me down the familiar path of the hero's journey. So I had an outline and I started writing, but what I had more than anything was a really good finale. Like, I knew exactly what the finale would be and what the outcome of the story would be. A lot of writers will go ahead and write that first. Get it out of the way. They're excited about it. They want to get to it. They're going to write it. I used that finale as the carrot on the stick. You know, I said I won't write it till I get to it. So the goal was get to the end. Get to page 440 or whatever it is to write that finale. So I just started writing, and I had a notebook of characters, locations, things that I wanted to have in there, and it took me a whole year, an entire year, to write the first version of The Seven Trunks. And The Seven Trunks is the story of a boy who's 16. His name is Jack Ransom. And it's almost summertime. He's about to get out of school for the summer. And he thinks his father is coming to take him away for the summer and show him the family business, which is selling steel and iron to the railroad. The time is 1902. It allows me to get rid of cell phones and technology and add in amazing stuff that would only be amazing in 1902, but is commonplace today. So instead of his father showing up, this mysterious man named Mr. Ree, R-E-E, shows up. He's dressed all in black. He's got a top hat. And he tells Jack that everything he knows about his father is a lie. And that his father is actually a world-class stage magician named Kin Wong Chi, who has traveled the world doing amazing shows and becoming the world's greatest magician. And he's gone missing. So Jack has a choice. Leave school and go with this man and try to find his father, or stay. So, of course, he has to go, otherwise there's no story. So we learn a little bit about Jack. We learn that he's afraid of suits of armor for some bizarre reason. That he's kind of good at magic. He didn't realize it until this man told him. And he's taken to the train station where he meets a small person named Micro, who is the engineer and pilot of Engine 17, a beautiful blue Art Deco train that his father uses to travel around the world. Jack takes no mention of the word travel around the world or pilot. He just sees a beautiful train. So they set out on this train, the three of them, to retrace the steps, because what's happened is Jack's father has gone off in search of these keys. And they already have the trunk. He has shown the trunk. This is the trunk made by Jesus when he was a carpenter. And Jack doesn't really believe it. And so whether there's treasure or power or whatever in these trunks, they can only be opened with these keys. And the only way to find his father is to follow the path of the keys and catch up to him out there somewhere in the big wide world. So the stage is set for this great, classic, I always use the word handcrafted adventure. And the original story is told with basic chapters. It's a third-person narrative, so we're seeing it from Jack's point of view, but we are not Jack. So it doesn't say I went here, I went there. It says Jack went there, Jack goes there. It's very standard Harry Potter clone book. I have no, illusion about that. They follow the path of these keys. Along the way, they meet cowboys in the Old West, and they have to break into a museum, and they have to perform magic before a theater of people in Germany. They have to battle other stage magicians who think that somebody has stolen Ken Wong Chi's train, and then we find out, when they're chased by the police, that Engine 17 can fly. Big Zeppelin balloons pop out, and the train is airborne. It's very steampunk. Before I knew what steampunk was, remember this is 2003. But I just loved writing it. I loved the adventure and the handcrafted feel of it. The book is about leather and copper and brass and magic and a boy trying to find his father, and more importantly, trying to find himself. And the last quarter of the book takes place on an island, a fictional island in the somewhere in the ocean named Thyr, where Jack discovers that he's actually a prince, and that his father stole him away in the middle of the night long ago, and that on Thyr he's revered as royalty, and he's going to be married. And the people of Thyr, the queen, his mother, has lied to the people of Thyr for 16 years because they've not ever seen the prince. And she's thrilled that he's back. Engine 17 crashes. Micro and Mr. Ree are presumed dead. And Jack is locked away in the castle for 100 or more pages, where he's groomed to be a prince. He is taught swordplay and manners, and he is beaten and beaten down until he gives in. And then he meets Elizabeth Morningstar, the princess he is to be married to. Now, she's from an island across the way called Here. So we have here and there, if you're paying attention. And I remember writing that sequence. And it's always interesting when you put your characters that you love, well, when you kill them. I remember wrecking the train and killing Micro and Ree. And I was physically sick for a while. Like I felt like hollow inside. Like a chocolate Easter bunny. Hollow completely. And then when Jack kept getting beat and he was put in the West Tower, which collapses until it kills you, and he had to escape, and I wrote this character of the Queen like she's just vicious. She's a cold-hearted monster. And everything Jack tries to get away fails. And I just felt like you just feel, because these characters are you. They're yours. Your blood and your life force is on the page with these characters. And then you put them through the ringer and you feel sick. Even if you know the outcome in your head and everything is going to be okay, living in the moment, writing despair is hard. You are emotionally affected by the projects that you take on. When I'm writing big action sequences, and there are a bunch in the book, I'm like, flying, yeah, the train does this and dodges that. It's fun. And then you get down to the despair, and it hurts. You just want to get through it, but you can't, because these characters can't grow with you unless they go through strife. So there's a scene in the book that it's the one I'm the most proud of. So they're at the big, the big ball to bring the princess over for the first time to announce the royal engagement and when the wedding will be. And I along the way I borrowed liberally from the things that I like the most. Movies, fun bits of dialogue that I could twist and make my own. The whole engagement party is straight out of Coming to America. In fact, Jack discovers he's a prince by seeing his picture on currency, just like Akeem in Coming to America. So I'm a big fan of Coming to America. They bring the queen, the princess in on a litter, rose petals, just like Coming to America. And Jack is terrified. He is scared to death of this girl because he doesn't know her. He's never seen her. He can't figure out how to get out of marrying her. It takes the whole narrative of the book, and you actually forget that you were on this journey to get these keys, and now you're stuck in this castle trying to deal with this marriage thing and this horrible, horrible queen. So they bring the princess in, and they're about to introduce the two of them, and she takes off running and locks herself in a room. And the queen takes Jack and drags him and says, "You're going to go in that room and you're going to fix this now." And I got Jack all the way to the door, and just as he's about to go in, I took a break. I took a month off because I didn't know what I was going to do. This is the first time these two characters have met. In my mind's eye, in my head, they are destined to have this amazing love story. I'm going to write the most amazing romantic love story. It has to be so good that Jack would give up looking for his father for this woman. So she has to be great. And he has to be what she is looking for. And if you've ever done a project like this, you know you can't just make it happen. It has to happen organically, or it doesn't happen at all. So with Jack outside that door, I had to come up with, well, what are they going to do inside? How am I going to, in one scene, set this up for everything that I just described? And this is where you find out if this is right for you. Because think about this. I'm like nearly 400 pages in. I'm not going to quit this time. I know where I'm going finale-wise. And I'm not going to quit. But I've reached a point where I have painted myself into the tiniest of corners. And if I can't get out of this corner, we have no story. And I found, now that I'm on book 4, I do this time and time again because I want the reader to be as surprised as I am that the characters found a way out of this. So I got him up to the door and I just took a break, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And when I finally sat down to continue the story, I came up with the most elegant, organic way for these two to see each other in a brand new light. So Jack goes in. He's terrified. And she's angry. She's not anything that he expected. She's beautiful, but she's just pissed off. She's like, "I don't know you. I'm not getting married to you. Who the hell are you? Some prince?" And he's like, No, I'm a regular guy. She's like, Yeah, sure you are. So what happens is, they get a tea service brought in. And Jack pours tea for the two of them. And in doing so, he spills tea all over the couch. And he freaks out because he's been dealing with his mom, his mother, his newfound mother. And he knows that she's crazy. And that this is the kind of thing that will get him beat. So he gets down on his hands and knees, muttering to himself in a panic, cleaning this up. And that's the moment. Because Elizabeth sees him and sees that he is nothing that she expected. He is not the bravado, braggart, royal son of the queen. He's a normal guy who's scared of the consequences of spilling tea on a couch. I know it sounds so innocuous, but putting it together and watching it play out and then having an organic conversation between the two characters after that, that's what writing is. It's such a magical moment in the book because it sets in motion all the books that follow. If Jack and Elizabeth don't get together, we have no story. Zero. Because love is the greatest motivator of all. And so I got that moment done, and then I was able to just push forward and write this really romantic courtship between the two of them. So he decides he's going to escape, but he's going to take her with him. And they have this amazing, beautiful action set piece at their wedding, finally, with Elizabeth and him kissing as man and wife and floating into the air using his magic. The last quarter, the last 100 pages of my first book, which at the time was The Seven Trunks. It's a movie. It's one of the greatest movies never made, as far as I'm concerned. In my head, I can see it so vividly. And I remember that action sequence, writing it again and again and again until it was flawless and every beat makes sense. In the end, Jack is able to acquire the last two keys. Engine 17 and Mr. Ree are resurrected like the phoenix from the ashes. Jack escapes. Elizabeth is left behind. And the only thing Jack leaves Thier with is that he loves Elizabeth, which he calls Lizzie. He's going to go back and get her at some point. And he finds out that when he was a baby, someone was trying to kill him by toppling suits of armor on top of him. So we get the catalyst behind his fear and why the suit of armor on the train scares him so much. Once Engine 17 leaves Thier, I had 2 or 3 other adventures planned, and I remember writing it and then reading it back and being literally exhausted, completely exhausted, and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be one of those guys that has extra stuff that I'm going to have to push to book 2. So I pushed a lot of this stuff to book 2 because once they leave Thier, it's time for the finale. This book is over. So I got to the finale. I wrote this amazing, fun, cinematic finale where they open the trunks, where the real villain is revealed. Jack's father is located, and the story ends with the idea that if we wanted to continue, we could, right? That took a whole year. It was a long year, too, because writing a book is lonely. It's sad because you're alone. Have you ever seen a picture of George Lucas writing Star Wars? He looks like he wants to die. You know what I mean? I've never seen anybody like, I'm going writing. Oh, really? Yes. No. If you're a writer, you have to write. But it's not fun. I'll spend 3 hours working on pages for my book. I will give up time with the family. They will watch a movie. Video games are being played. Books are being read. I will sit here and write 3 hours, and in the end, I will have 5 pages. 3 hours, 5 pages in a book that's probably going to be 500 pages. It sucks. It really sucks, especially when you're at the beginning, because you don't know if you're going to finish, and you don't know if all of this is going to be for nothing. And when I wrote The Seven Trunks, the idea was I was going to self-publish it. There are a bunch of places I found online that will self-publish your book. It costs about $2,000, and you end up with 100 to 150 hardbound books. That's what I was going to do. The Seven Trunks clocked in at about, I think it was a little over 400 pages. I was extraordinarily proud of it. It tells a complete story. It takes place in 1902. It has action. It has intrigue. It has lies and suspense and mystery and good resolutions. But for whatever reason, I didn't publish that version of the book. And instead, I decided to rewrite it. Now, we're in 2004, 2005. The book contains my heart and soul is in that book. But it also contains characters named after my family. So Rachel is in it. She's the queen. Don't make any connections. It was simply a matter of putting a name to it and also telling her to hang on, that eventually the queen, in another tale down the line, would redeem herself. But you don't know that. You don't know if you're ever going to write another one. So all these characters are in the book. And then something happens. I decide to refine the book. And I'm not sure exactly the moment I had, but I decided that it needed a wraparound story. Like, it needed a modern day story of somebody finding this old story. So that changed everything. So 2006 and 2007, I set about writing this wraparound story. And it starred, it was a new character named Trevor Lodge. And he was 23, 24, sarcastic, layabout, needed a job, gets a job at the Magicians Club. And he's there to help them get their files in order. And his boss is Mr. Crinklewort. And there's a bunch of other characters in and around the Magicians Club. And so I wrote about 80% of that. It was a lot of pages. And you have to understand, my wife had been dealing with this stupid book project of mine. At this point, 3 or 4 years. And it wasn't like constant. I would pick it up, I'd put it down. I'd pick it up, put it down. I'm going to be a writer. Sure you are. I'm going to write this book. Sure, I'm going to finish this book. And she would just tell me, why don't you just finish it? You're driving us all crazy. And I was like, I'm driving myself crazy with this book. And I got nearly in with Trevor, and I would tell my wife about it, and she was, mildly interested. And then one day, writing the Trevor part of it, I realized that I hated him. I didn't like Trevor at all. Trevor was sarcastic. He was not sympathetic. We didn't care, or I didn't care what happened to him, and I'm the one creating him out of thin air. So I remember going to Rachel, and I was like, hey, you know that book that I'm almost finished with? Because I was about 25 pages from finishing the final version. She goes, yeah. I said, I'm going to start over. She looked at me like she wanted to physically hurt me. She says, this is not healthy. This book is not healthy. You are driving yourself insane. And you know what? She was totally right. I was driving myself to the brink of madness on this. Because I thought it's going to reach a form where it's perfect and I stop. You know what I mean? You ever seen Wonder Boys? Where Michael Douglas can't stop writing? I didn't quite have that sickness. But what I had was, it was never going to be good enough. Now by this time, we've had a daughter. And Josie is 2 years old. So I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll throw Trevor away. And I will write it as if it's Josie. But Josie's not 2. Josie will be 16. So I started over. Now, if you've ever seen a major project get to the brink of completion and then stop and somebody start over. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. I had seen on the Monsters, Inc. DVD, in the making of, they give you the storyboards for the original version of Monsters, Inc., where Boo becomes a scare floor monster and takes revenge on her brothers who torment her. It's a totally different story. And I remember being really struck by that. Like, look at this. Pixar wrote this whole screenplay. They drew it all out on note cards, and then somebody in a meeting said, it ain't working. And somebody agreed, and hands went up, and they threw it all away. And they started over. And they came up with a better story, because they learned their lessons from the other one. And I thought, well, if Monsters, Inc. can do it, I can do it. And so I drove my family insane by starting over. It was a tough decision. But anybody who's created anything knows you have to follow what the muse is saying to you, what the creative, ethereal ghost is beckoning you. And if the journey, it looks like it's about to end and you need to start over, you have to start over. So what I did was, I started over. And I started writing first person as Josie, 16 years old. And you know what? It flew off my hand. Josie took on a life of her own. The character became so vivid and so real that it was like in Amadeus, as if I was taking dictation. When I wrote Josie, when I still do, I go into a trance and I let Josie dictate where the story is going to go. Josie is opinionated. She has a mind of her own. She's sarcastic, but in a right way, in a soft way. And for whatever reason, it just clicked. And I finished so fast, I was shocked. Like, I'm already done with the first draft. So I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And a guy at work named Daniel, at the same time, was working on a book. It's called The Short Death of Phineas Bean by Daniel Miller. It's available on Amazon. And Daniel discovered a website called CreateSpace. CreateSpace is owned by Amazon. Amazon wants your content. They want to sell things, and they'll sell anything. So CreateSpace will allow you to publish your book through Amazon, print on demand. There are no physical copies anywhere until somebody orders it. It's printed. And it costs nothing. I couldn't believe it. To get the first proof copy of my book cost $10. So I finished the Josie story. I can remember like Doc Brown vividly, hanging a clock in my bathroom. No, getting the chug along. We are pushing the story forward, and I knew where the Josie story was going to end. Remember, I've already finished the Jack's story years ago. It's putting the Josie wraparound on it, right? So I remember. I remember vividly. I was in Riverside, sitting at my desk, clacking on the typewriter, and I could tell where the story was going, and then I just stopped. And I pulled back from the screen, I looked at it, and I realized I'm 2 pages from finishing my first novel. Like, really finishing it. And I kept going, and I kept going, and I put the final line in, and I was crying. So much emotion welled up inside me. Oh my God. Like, I did it. Whether it goes anywhere or just my kids read it, I wrote my first novel. This is my home run. This is my touchdown. This is all the sports equivalents for nerds like me. I did it. I set out on a journey in 2003. And in 2000, I want to say 9, I finished it. I finished the first novel. So I just remember, like, I couldn't believe it. What do you do? Like, let's toast. Let's fireworks. It's nothing. I was alone at home, and I was like, I finished it. Anyone? No? Oh, Daddy finished his. Oh, and I was like, Rachel comes home, I'm like, hey, I finished the novel. Oh, that's good, honey. No, I got chicken for dinner. Oh, well, okay. Okay. So I uploaded it to CreateSpace. I had worked out a deal with Daniel where I read his audiobook of Phineas Bean. It's available on Audible. And he drew my cover. It was a long process drawing that cover. So one day, not long after that, UPS arrived with the book. And it was massive. It was uncut. It was sloppy. But gosh darn it, it was my book. And I remember opening it I had my George McFly moment where the book arrived and Biff came in and opened it for me. Well, Biff wasn't there, but you know what I mean. And that was such an amazing moment to hold that book in my hand, you know. When I talked about my friend, the Imagineer, I can only, like, when he rides through something for the first time or sees something lock into place like it's going to work, you just get such a rush. Like, oh my God, it's here. It's happening. This book is real. If nobody ever buys it, it doesn't matter. I'm going to leave this here after I'm gone. So little did I know that getting that proof copy in the mail would be only the first of many, many more steps until somebody actually was able to purchase it through Amazon. So, and the book that they purchase now bears no resemblance to the copy that came in the mail that day. It's so different and so edited. Somewhere along the lines, the 7 trunks were thrown out and the book became the 6th key. I went through many titles. The Magician's Son, My Father the Liar, Jack Ransom and the 6 Keys, Josie Turner and the 6 Keys, Keys to the Kingdom, Key this, Key that, Train this, Train that. I kept coming back to the 6th key over and over again, and that's what stuck, the 6th key from the secret files of the Magician's Club. Euphoria was all I felt that day. Little did I know, like I said, how much, oh my God, work there would still be before it could be purchased. But we will talk about that journey on the next episode of 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?